Athens, of course, was famous for um, philosophers and so on. And Aristotle was a student of Plato's for about 20 years. Then he stayed on himself in Athens at Plato's school, the academy, to teach. But he also had a time in which he was recalled back to Macedonia because King Philip he wanted a tutor for his son, and his son was someone who became Alexander the Great. So Aristotle was the tutor to Alexander the Great when he was a teenager. Um, and then when Philip of Macedonia died and Alexander the Great became king, he grew up. He didn't want to go to school anymore, and what he wanted to do was to conquer all of the known world. And it is legend is that for Aristotle, he performed the courtesy of wherever he went, where he found strange and exotic plants and strange and exotic animals. He saved them and sent them back to Aristotle. Aristotle was very interested in biology. Um, but anyway, that's just a sort of a chatty kind of connection between Aristotle and his times. Uh, his father was a doctor to the king, and he himself was tutor to Alexander the Great. He went to Plato's school for 20 years, but then he became independent in the sense that they set up his own school, the Lyceum, uh, and his own philosophy, even as much as it was rooted in what he had learned over 20 years with Plato, he began to develop his own ideas out of that. And one of the ideas that he developed out of that came as a kind of rejection of Plato, and even back Plato's teacher was Socrates. What what is at stake here? The issue is that Socrates had a doctrine, a teaching that knowledge is virtue. That just to know what's right and wrong will give you the will to do what's right or wrong. So the knowledge and virtue were the same thing. And Plato continued on in that fashion. And their thinking was something like this: nobody ever deliberately does something that they think is wrong, that's going to be harmful either to them or others. That when they're doing something, they think it's the best thing to do. And their only problem is they lack wisdom. They don't see the consequences of it. Like now, teenagers, well, at least when I was a teenager, they would go out on Friday nights and drink and smoke, thinking that they were being real grown up, and this was a desirable thing to do. But we have since learned don't drink and drive, and we've since learned tobacco is not too good for you. But Plato, I think, would want to insist that as those boys, as those girls, as they grow up and get wiser, they will stop the drinking and driving, they will stop the smoking because they see the wisdom of it. All you have to do is kind of have better understanding. And Aristotle rejected that. He rejected this doctrine that knowledge is virtue. He says there's all kinds of people who know what the right thing is, but they just don't do it. And some of the example he comes up with speak to me. He said, like, they go to their doctors and their doctors tell them this is what you should eat. This is the routine you have, and you say to your doctor, sounds good. And then you go home and you don't implement it. You think somehow you're going to get better just by listening to the doctor. So Aristotle's pointing out a kind of basic moral distinction, that to know something is not the same thing as to do it. To know something is not the same thing as to will it. And one of the big problems that we have is, we might say, training our will to do what our intellect knows is right. So let's say he's a step beyond Plato and Socrates here, in that he wants to develop what he will call intellectual virtues, by which you come to know what's right and wrong. you take classes, you read books, you study, you learn about the world you're in. And then, but besides intellectual virtues, we need moral virtues. The moral virtues help us to discipline ourselves do the things that we should do, and to avoid the things that we shouldn't do. So that's just a sort of biographical bit where I wanted to show that Plato certainly was Aristotle's teacher, but at this point in ethics, anyway, Aristotle is parting ways with Plato. Let me just read a little bit from the introduction to. Now, this is the text, not the Lawhead text, which is from a textbook and is commentary, but this is the selection from the Nicomachean Ethics. The introductory paragraph to it says that the following selection is from Book 2 of Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. In Book 1, Aristotle argues that the highest human good is eudaimonia. It's a Greek word meaning total well-being or happiness. It is, he says, our only self-sufficient goal and the ultimate goal of all human action. He then argues that an activity of the soul or a course of action in accordance with reason. I don't know if I read that. Let's see. He argues that happiness is determined by the proper function of humans, which he defines as, quote, an activity of the soul or a course of action with reason. Thus, a happy individual is one who lives in accordance with reason, and each individual should develop virtues, character traits, or dispositions that lead to this goal. Because human reason is both practical and intellectual, human virtues come in two kinds, moral and intellectual. So that's kind of preparatory. I would say that the main thing that we need to get out of it is that as a sort of basic starting point in his ethics, Aristotle says all agents, all actors, all people who are acting and operating in life operate for some purpose, do something for a goal. The Greek word he uses is telos. Telos means an end, not an end in the chronological sense, but end in the sense of purpose, end in the sense of final goal. So we act for a goal, and he wants to say that the final goal or purpose of life is happiness. Yeah.
That must be how you spell
telos. Yeah. Telos. And that's the it's not an English word. It's just from the Greek. Oh, great. Okay. So the biggest problem here is that I will become pedantic, which I love this stuff. Why do they call it the Nicomachean Ethics? These are really Aristotle's class notes, which when he died, his son organized them, brought them together, and published them as one book. And his son's name is Nicomachus, as his father's name was Nicomachus. If you guys ever saw the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, you'll see at one point they say everybody in a Greek family made it. Well, in Aristotle's family, this was the case. So we call this the Nicomachean Ethics because Nicomachus, the son, was a editor, and what all he's done is organize his father's classroom notes. Just a focusing on the word virtue. Virtue really in Greek could be translated excellence. that a virtue is something that you're excellent at. It doesn't necessarily have the moral sense that we have. It certainly doesn't have that we have, which is kind of a holdover from the Victorian era. That we think that when you're talking about someone's virtue, you're talking about sex. The two closest virtues have to are habit and excellence. Well developed person, they always behave the right way in the right situation. They've self-discipline, self-control, always do the right thing, not overreact or underreact. So that virtue means that kind of thing. Excellent. So let's move ahead here. One of the key, and now I'm in the selected writings, the selected writings of Aristotle.
I can also promise you, record photos of major arrests that your police can take credit for.
Okay.
Sorry. I couldn't do it from my computer. Now you're on again.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Can you hear me? Not that I can tell. So they can hear me better. I can. Well, they can try. Okay. Okay. Right. One of the key ideas is these guys teaching those people after the end. And just to give you an illustration of what that I mean, you can use this course. You can use this course for and you get to create. You want to learn something fast. You want to move on with the rest of your life. You want to be in a situation where you have more to say and you decide what you like and choose what you want to do, and so on. And that is a very important component of happiness. So there can be a hierarchy of ends. Happiness is the end point, but being educated is a sort of medium point. It facilitates the effort to do that. So that's a main point with Aristotle, that
Sorry, everybody.
Your speaker is not working. Please
Speaker is not working.
your connection.
Okay.
Use a different speaker. Wasn't muted it.
Speaker view. The last clear sound was when Dr. Mike talked about virtue. Okay, well, we're not going to
You're on a deer.
somebody's in the background.
Yeah.
I can't tell who it is. Everybody looks like they're muted. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. I think you should be able to go back to your now. Try talking again.
Okay. Hello, can you all hear me? Maybe you can hear me and I can't hear you. I don't know.
Yes, they say it's better.
It's better.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to start with it, just to get into the selections from the Nicomachean Ethics, is chapter 2, and just to say that a really key idea for Aristotle in his ethics is the notion of moderation. That in our feelings and in our actions, we should shoot for a mean. We should try to be in the middle. I have a story for you. I used to work at a university in Wisconsin, in which I was in the philosophy department. There were 3 or 4 guys in the philosophy department, and after classes at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, maybe once or twice a week, they would stop for beer and pizza. So they'd say to me, Michael, why don't you should come by and have a few beers with us. I said, okay, that's fine. So these guys are from Milwaukee. So beer to them is like water, mother's milk. So I'd sit and I'd drink out of a glass, but they had pitchers. Every time my glass was half full, they would fill it up some more. Well, at 5 o'clock, I go home to meet my wife, and she says, "Hi, how are you? Did you have a good day?" I said, "Yeah, I had a good day. I think I'd like to take a nap." And she said, "Well, I'm cooking here, and we're going to have dinner." "Oh, I don't feel like dinner. I think we got to take a nap." She said, "You've been out with those boys from the philosophy department. I don't want you going out with them afternoon. I haven't seen anyone all day. You should be coming home." So then weeks go by, and the friends are saying, "You're not coming to stop and have pizza and beer with us. Why is that?" I said, "Because my wife says that I drink too much beer." They said, "Well," and one of the guys, George, says, "You've got to find Aristotle's mean." I said, "What do you mean, the mean?" He said, "Well, you have to find out what's the right amount for you. Not too little, not too much. Just enough to be sociable, but not so much that your wife gets mad at you." And I said, "Well, how am I supposed to find the mean?" He said, "Well, you can't find the mean until you go beyond it. And then once you've gone beyond it, you say, okay, that was too much." Well, I came to the mean. It was okay to have 2 beers with them, but not 4. So Aristotle is saying that the process of becoming a moral person is a process of trial and error, and trying to not to be too not to be too indulgent, not to practice too much self-denial, but to find a sort of middle ground where it's just the right amount of feeling, and just the right amount of action, or just the right amount of beer. So he says, I'm on page 25 of the Nicomachean Ethics, or chapter 2. "Let's begin with the following observation. It is in the nature of moral qualities that they can be destroyed by deficiency on the one hand, or excess on the other hand. We see this in the instance of bodily health and strength. Physical strength is destroyed by too much and also by too little exercise. Similarly, health is ruined by eating or drinking either too much or too little, while it's produced, increased, and preserved by taking the right quantity of drink and victuals." I take victuals as food. "Well, it's the same with temperance and courage and the other virtues. The man who shuns and fears everything and can stand up to nothing becomes a coward. The man who is afraid of nothing at all but marches up to every danger becomes foolhardy. In the same way, the man who indulges in every pleasure without refraining from a single one becomes incontinent. If, on the other hand, the man behaves like a boor in a comedy and turns his back on every pleasure, he will find his sensibilities become blunted. So also, temperance and courage are destroyed both by excess and deficiency. They are kept alive by the observation of the mean." So that's what he means by the mean, in our eating and in our exercising, in our living generally, to be not too much excess, not too little, and be deficient. Let's see now. We come into a rather meaty section here, and it's really requires some thinking, but it really is kind of the heart of his argument. Chapter 4 in the Nicomachean Ethics, chapter 4, book 2, in which he talks about virtues and how we develop them. "A difficulty, however, may be raised as to what we mean when we say that we must perform just actions if we're going to become just, and temperate actions if we're going to become temperate. It may well be argued that if I do what is just and temperate, I am just and temperate already, exactly as if I spell words or play music correctly, I must already be literate or musical." So the argument here is, if you can do it, if you can operate this way, then you must be that way. He says, well, the parallelism with art and so on doesn't work, and scholarship. But let's get beyond that. That's the question. How can you say that do brave things and do just things and temperate things before you have developed those virtues? He says that in order to do just and temperate and virtuous things, we have to do them to be in a certain frame of mind when we do them. So it isn't just what we do or what we feel, but what we think about it, how we process it, how we feel about it from an interior point of view. He says 3 conditions are involved before we can judge that an action really was virtuous. The 3 conditions are: 1, the agent must act in the full consciousness of what he's doing, so you must know what you're doing. 2, he must will his action and will it for its own sake. That means you must want to do what you're doing and not do it accidentally. 3, the action must proceed from a fixed and unchangeable disposition. So those are the three conditions for a virtuous act. Now, these requirements, if we accept mere knowledge, are not counted among necessary qualifications for the artist. For the acquisition of virtue, on the other hand, knowledge is of little or no value. But the other requirements are of immense sovereign importance, since it is the repeated performance of just and temperate actions that produce virtue. Actions, to be sure, are called just and temperate when they're such as a just and temperate man would do. But the doer is not just and temperate because he does such things, but when he does them in the way of just and temperate persons. It is therefore quite fair to say that a man becomes just by the performance of just, and temperate by the performance of temperate actions. Nor is there the smallest likelihood of a man becoming good by any other course of action or conduct. Let me see if I can put my finger on what he's talking about. You know, when you're dealing with little kids, my brother used to tell me he taught physical education in the San Francisco schools. He said kindergartners, you know, you throw out a number of balls and you let them play with it, but the kids always hog the balls. So the teacher says you have to share the ball. So the kids don't really know what sharing is, and they run around chasing the ball, say share, 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 and then when they get the ball, they run away. They think share means give the ball to me. So it takes a while to learn how to share and to also to interiorize what sharing is. It's doing something good for and with the other person. It's not just it's my turn. So there are virtues like I know, I don't know if any of you know Weight Watchers. But Weight Watchers say you can't eat these particular kinds of foods, that there are too many points and they're too much calories and so on. So you can be at a party, you can be at a wedding, you can be in some social event where someone offers you something to eat and it doesn't fit in with your Weight Watcher schedule or you know what you're supposed to be eating. Well, I think if you turn it down, the Weight Watchers people will be happy. But if you turn it down, you may insult the hostess. It's always possible to take a little and eat just a little bit. It's always possible to make an exception on a particular day. Because we shouldn't be overzealous or not zealous enough. But there are all kinds of situations, whatever our dietary regimen is, where we must suspend it in order to do the appropriate thing in a certain circumstance. So we not only have to be temperate in our use of food, but we have to be temperate in a moderate way, not being fanatic about it, not being obsessive about it. So you see that moral life is a little more complicated than just doing good and avoiding evil. It's having the right spirit when you do that.
That's agreed with you that sharing takes a long time to learn, and Maria's thanking you for an easy explanation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Very good. Okay. We want to get into chapter 6 of the Nicomachean Ethics, which is the very heart of it. Now, when you have to, I ask you to pay attention here because your writing assignment is to, the first thing is, tell me how Aristotle defines virtue. Now, what I want to do is point out to you the section of this writing here where he's defining it. So your own work, when you're writing your paper, will only be to take out Aristotle's definition and put it at the top of the paper and write everything from that point of view. So it's in chapter 6. He says, I don't know if you have the papers in front of you, the Nicomachean Ethics, but the second column on page 28, he says there's a line there that is set off from the rest of the text in column 2. Goodness is one, evil is multiform. What Aristotle is getting at there, and he likes to use this symbol too, that moral life is like archery. It's shooting an arrow at the target. And shooting an arrow at the target, there is innumerable ways of not getting it right, and only one way to get it right. So similarly, in our interaction with other people and feelings and so on, it's like being an archer, to hit it right at the right place, at the right point, at the right time. It's more like an art. So he says goodness is one. What he means, hitting the target in the middle is one. Evil is multiform. Missing the target is easy. Lots of ways to do that. Now he follows that with this sentence, which I'll repeat for you maybe 10 times, just to make sure that we've got it right. The definition of virtue. We may now define virtue as a disposition of the soul, in which, when it has to choose among actions and feelings, it observes the mean relative to us, as would take shape in the mind of a man of sense or of practical wisdom. So that's his definition of virtue. In the Lawhead piece, Lawhead gives a definition of virtue too. Aristotle's definition of virtue, and it's basically the same, but the translation's a little bit different. So I'm going to give you both, because if you run across them, then actually if you have two different translations, it could help you, because you need to get beyond the words and trying to get the meaning of it. But in the Lawhead book, he says he describes virtue or a human excellence as a state of character concerned with a choice, lying in a mean, that is, the mean relative to us, this being determined by a rational principle, and by that principle by which a man of practical wisdom would determine it. So what I'll do is go back to the definition from the text and talk about that for a bit. Virtue is, now I'm simply repeating myself here, but we may now define virtue as a disposition of the soul. So this is this gives a little bit more depth to things. Virtue is a state of character or a disposition of the soul. I can remember there's lots of times that I tell people that I will do something. I'm at a party and everyone's feeling fine. And they say we should all room together next semester. Or they say, let's all take a trip to Europe next year. Let's all go to Hawaii. And everybody says it. And I say, yeah, I'm down for that. Then I go home and I think, I don't have the money to do this. And I don't like the people that much. And I don't think I'm going to go. That is to say, there can be a big difference what a person says at one time or does at one time, and it's not really part of their character. It isn't the way that they normally or usually would respond. I was at a class reunion the other day, and a guy that I never used to even talk to, I didn't even realize he was part of our class for 8 years, came over and said to me, "Let me give you my card." I said, "Oh, okay, thank you." He said, "Call me sometime. We should have lunch. I want to talk more with you." I said, "I certainly will." That's great. Well, I still haven't called him. So virtue has something to do not with passing events, but the way that you respond routinely. I've seen some mothers who are really cool. That is to say, there's chaos going around them, and they always keep their patience. They're not angry with the kids. They always speak to the kids patiently and kindly, and so on. They may blow up on an occasional basis. You never know. Everybody's in a bad mood, but that doesn't make them a non-virtuous person. That doesn't make them a not excellent person. It's what you do, what your character shows from a routine point of view. So the first thing he says, virtue is a disposition of the soul. It's a permanent way of being oriented to things. Some people overreact. If you say something, they jump at you, or if a car cuts you off on the freeway, you start swearing. Or a friend of mine actually goes after them. Other people, they never say anything at all. They never do anything at all. So if you're going to have a driver, you want someone who's patient and prudent and has good judgment and does not react to things. So that's the first part of it, a disposition of the soul. When it has to choose among actions and feelings, actually, I'm trying to think of an example for you. Okay, this is one that comes to mind. I don't know how appropriate it is, or I don't want to put everyone off. But there I was. I'm at a high school dance, a freshman dance or something, and all the boys were on one side of the ballroom, and all the girls are lined up on the other side. So I thought, I'll take a chance. I walk across the floor to some girl sitting there, and I said, "Would you like to dance?" And she said, "No." I said, "Okay." And moved down 3 or 4 people. "Would you like to dance?" "Yes." Well, I mean, if someone's come all the way across the floor to humiliate himself, let's show a little excellence, a little virtue, a little character. Say, oh, just even lie. Say, well, no, I don't feel that well right now. But just say, no, I don't know. When one has to choose among actions and feelings. Okay. It observes the mean relative to us. So I guess all I can do is go back to my example about drinking beer with my friends after work. What I needed to find was the mean relative to me. There's a way in which I can't say that the perfect moral rule is never drink beer. I can't say the perfect moral rule is only drink 2 beers. I can't say that the perfect moral rule is drink till you get drunk. Every person is going to find a different mean, a different place. What's the right amount for them? I think Aristotle, if I can find out where he says it, he talks about the mean. He says for an athlete, there could be an athlete in the Olympics because they had them there, and he's in training. He refers to an athlete named Milo. I don't know if I can find it here, but he said for Milo, maybe 10 pounds of meat the right amount. For someone else who's not as vigorous as Milo, maybe 3 pounds of meat is enough. But what is proper for one person will not be proper for the other, and so the mean is defined relative to the person. Now we get into a sort of paradoxical situation where he says it observes the mean relative to us. So that seems that we have all the freedom in the world. We do whatever seems right to us. But he says, this being determined, what is the mean for us, is determined by such a rule or principle as would take shape in the mind of a man of practical, a man of sense or practical wisdom. So there is an objective, let's say, principle there. Don't drink so much that you can't fulfill the duties you have, to go home and have dinner with your wife, to drink a little bit, to sit and have socialize with your friends. Just the right amount, so you can be with your friends in a happy, prudent way, and you can be at home with your wife or husband in a happy, prudent way. But so there's both a subjective side to it and an objective side. The subjective side is what everybody has to find out what the mean for themselves is. But the objective side is the mean is the thing that helps them to live and act in a rational way. That's, I think, okay, that's the heart of the paradox that Aristotle's talking about here. Okay, any questions on that? That's kind of the hardest part of it. Okay.
I'll just pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions. I'll tell you if anyone. It's great information. I would like that. She'd like to know the text you're working on.
No, the text.
Yes.
Well, we've put them up online, and the text that I'm working from is Moral Virtue by Aristotle, and it is selections from the Nicomachean Ethics.
And that's the chapter that's online this week.
Yeah, and now is this online as well?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm basically working from this one text, but this text is kind of easier to work with and is more explanatory. But I'm taking it from the horse's mouth because that's the harder, more difficult text. But the two texts are complementary. In the textbook one, Lawhead goes through Aristotle's definition of character, and he takes each section of the definition and writes a couple paragraphs on it. He says virtue is a state of character. That's what we were trying to say. It's disposition. And he also says virtue is concerned with a choice. This is all he's unpacking Aristotle's definition of virtue. Thirdly, virtue and the mean. Virtue has something to do with hitting the right middle ground, not too much, not too little. Universal principles and relative applications. And the mean is something that is determined by practical wisdom. So I think either of these texts are going to help you. The Aristotle text is a little more daunting, but the Lawhead book reads a little easier. But they both complement one another.
Maria has a question. She says, where is subjective and objective business, if any?
Where is the?
On this computer, it's off the screen. She asked, where the subjective and objective paradox can be seen in business, if any.
Oh. Okay. I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Apple is kind of setting a whole new standard in in industry, certainly in sales. And Apple, I don't know if you use Apple products or you go by Apple stores, but I've gone into Apple store. Now I'm an old guy, and I don't know. I'm always getting in trouble with my computer. I walk in the door, and there's a young person there that's willing to help you, wants to help you, and so on. And they're great. They say, "Oh no, that's not a problem. You just do this and that," and all of a sudden it's cleared up. Their customer service is so good. I've had major problems that I've gone in with them, and they put a new, I don't know what to call it, a new program in, and they updated things for me. I said, "What do I owe you?" It's free. So it seems to me, from one point of view, Apple is, subjectively generous. I mean, they have a good where they what do I say, where they meet with the public. They're great. They give away things for free advice, free knowledge, free care, and so on. On the other hand, their items are expensive. They go out of date quickly, and there is a built-in obsolescence. So, and sometimes you would say, well, that's because they're busy developing their technology all the time. But I would say, to me, for my mean, Apple, all the money that they take from me is well worth it, because they provide such generous service. So you could say the better service, better customer service reputation you have, the more money you're going to make. That is to say, it takes money to provide the customer service, but it will pay back in terms of getting repeat customers. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Now, I want to switch here, because in the Lawhead material, they have what we need is a chart, a visual. I don't know if you go online, you will find it. But here's, I don't know if you can see that visual. But I'm going to talk about what the visual is. Yeah, it's on 84 in the Lawhead book. Yeah, which is
uploaded to Moodle.
Okay. And what Aristotle's giving us here is a system to figure out virtues in the concrete. And he says, take an activity of, for example, confidence in facing danger. Okay, this is a situation I had. I was driving my kids to school one day, coming down 280 from San Francisco, and right about the golf course, there were two cars in front of me. If I was in the second lane, there was one car in the first lane and one car in the third lane. And I'm driving along, I'm maybe 20 feet behind him. Well, unbeknownst to either one of them, they both decided to merge into the second lane without realizing someone was coming over from far away and someone was coming over from the first lane. Well, when they saw one another, they swerved, and the person in lane one swerved, rolled over, and went down the hill and disappeared. And I thought I was driving by. Whoops, that's not good. Yeah. I had my two kids in the class. I thought, I'm not going to stop. And then I looked around, and there wasn't anyone else but me. And I realized if I did not stop and go check this person out, they might be down there forever. So I pulled the car over to the side, and I walked back to the place where it went over the road, off the road, and I went down to the car, which was now standing upright, but the windshield was sort of fractured like a broken egg. I mean, all little lines in it and so on. And there was a person in there, and I said, hello, hello. And I even broke the windshield, which we just had to push. And I kind of touched her hand and pat on. I said, what are you doing? She's going to CSM. She's a student. Her name's Marie. And I said, we're going to get help free soon, Marie. And I thought, I don't know where I'm going to get help. And all of a sudden, other people showed up, and one guy said, "I have a cell phone. I'm calling. The ambulance is coming. The police are coming." And I kept feeling that I was fearful that the car was going to, blow up or catch on fire. So I left because there were more and more people coming there, and the kids had to get to school, and I couldn't do anything more for her. And I got in the car, and they all said, "Hero Dad." Dad is such a hero. And I thought to myself, yes, I am. But I thought it would be cowardly to drive by her and just say, well, that's bad luck. On the other hand, it's rash to go down and check a crash out. But what can you do when there's a living person in the car? You have to take a few risks. So I don't think it was over rash. And therefore, it was courageous, because it wasn't too much and it wasn't too little. It was just I attended to what the necessities of the situation were. So when Aristotle talks about what's the activity, confidence in the face of danger. He said if we never face any danger at all, then we are cowards. On the other hand, if we rush into every danger that we could see, like I know people, I've been in bars where there have been bar fights, and they say, is this a private fight or can anyone get in it? So some people are very rash when it comes to public brawls. Courage is a matter of staying as far away from it as possible and not spilling your drink. So I don't know if Aristotle would count that as courage. I think for Aristotle, he was Plato was a soldier on the battlefield and was reputed to be a very brave person. But for the Greeks on the battlefield, cowardice is to run from the enemy. And rashness is to stay and fight the enemy when they're an overwhelmingly superior force. So courage is knowing when to retreat and when to hold your position. So this is a way to get an understanding of what virtues are. They're finding the middle ground, because what isn't right if you do it too little, and what's not right if you do it too much, gives you a sense of what the right thing to do is. Another example he offers is in enjoying pleasure, and the virtue, the proper thing is temperance. What temperance means is simply not too much, not too little. But he says let's say temperance is the virtue. The vice, a vice is a negative virtue. You can have two kinds of vice. You can have vice by excess and vice by deficit. So if the virtue is temperance, the vice by excess is self-indulgence. And the virtue by deficit, the vice by deficit is being puritanical. Puritanical is not a commonly used word, so I'm not sure, what to substitute for it. But the bad rap that the Puritans got was when they came to the United States, when they came to America, they were very prim and proper. They did not allow dancing. They did not allow drinking. They did not allow socializing. They did not, they were pretty dull folks, but they were trying to follow the gospel as strictly as they could. But it looks to modernize as being over temperate. Not enough fun. Okay, here's another area, giving money. The virtue is generosity. And this one, you really got to puzzle out. I'm not sure I can make this clear very, very quickly, but if you have an excess of generosity, what is that? An excess of generosity is vulgarity, they say, and a deficit, a vice of generosity is stinginess. Well, stinginess is easy enough to picture. This is Ebenezer Scrooge in the Christmas story, Christmas tale. But vulgarity, dare I say, these are rich people with big mansions that look extravagant. They're very generous with themselves. But there's a point at which money becomes vulgar. I know we as Americans haven't found that yet, but some other people would say yes. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to talk to you about, just to give you a sense of this chart, because on your papers, what you're supposed to write is give some examples of what he means by virtue and vice. And Aristotle gives you those, so you have to write them up and chat about them. The last one is the activity is telling the truth about oneself. And the virtue is self-honesty. Now, too much self-honesty is boastfulness. Let me tell you all about my life. Self-honesty in excess is boastfulness. Self-honesty as a vice and deficit is self-deprecation. So they say, I don't know. Some of the words they use, some of the descriptions are not that helpful. But there's a way in which you can be very honest about yourself. There's another way you can go on and on about yourself, and another way you can sort of put yourself down in a very unhelpful way. Okay, so that is meant to kind of set you up so you feel comfortable in writing your papers. The last part of it that I just want to talk a little bit about is how would you apply Aristotle's analysis to an area of your own life? Work, school, family, relationships. And I think at one point, maybe it was in a different class, I had students write a paper, if you were raising a child, how would Aristotle's virtues help you? Is raising a child is, you have to make judgments all the time because you're trying to cultivate virtue within the child, and so you have to make the judgment of as a parent. If the child wants to stay up because there's some special program on TV that they want to watch, and dad says no, you're scheduled, you go to bed at 8, and this is on at 8:30, you have to go to bed. So if you're a bright little kid, you run to mom. You say, Mommy, it's the special show's on, and Mommy says to Dad, oh, I think it'll be all right if she stays up just to see this. This is one of her favorite characters, Dad says, all right. But you're always, if you have a schedule, you're always in the dilemma raising children of being too strict and being too lenient, being too permissive and too harsh, that you somehow are always in the position where you need to find the middle road. Don't you're a mom? Do you find that?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yes.
I mean, it demands that you be wise, prudent. But okay, so when it comes time to write your papers on how you apply this analysis to your own life, you have to think about the situations you find yourself in, the relationships you find yourself in, at work, at school, in family, and in relationships. Pick one of those and write how there might be an issue of virtue and a issue of deficiency and issue of excess. So that's all, and that's what I've got for you. Unless you have some questions or any comments that you would like to make.
Give them a second. Oh, Beth has a question.
Beth, yeah.
It's about papers in general.
Okay.
You can see the comments here.
I do. From these. Go ahead. It's about papers in general. Yes. Answer is yes. You should do papers in general.
You see the question?
Do you have some feedback on our first paper so we can know how we are sitting with your expectations? Ha ha. Oh no, well, it's not funny. I have to confess to you, I've been very slow on correcting the papers, partly because I'm not sure I'm even using the Moodle correctly. So I'm going to be talking it over with Therese on when the papers are meeting the deadlines, when they're not meeting the deadlines, what papers I can grade and what I can grade them at, and so on. So I'm afraid it is simply my lack of skillfulness with Moodle that is that's accounted for it. And I promise to try to be less deficient and more skillful with it. But I understand what you're saying. You need some feedback. No problem. Sounds good. Well, it's the truth. Yeah.
More soon, huh?
Hmm?
More soon.
Yeah.
Ask if there's any other questions.
Yeah. Do you have any other questions about Aristotle or about virtue or about your papers?
Great lecture.
Great lecture. Since you've said that, I'm going to come back next week and give another one. Thank you.
Outside the box stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I'm dialing out.
Thank you. Okay. I'm glad we got a chance to interact.
Thanks. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Mike.
When you're ready to sign out, you just hit over here and you say end meeting.
And meeting. And we got to make sure that we